All right, what's up, guys? Today we have Michelle Bisson, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, be
Bison,
on. Yeah.
yeah, Bisson, I thought so. Okay, and she's doing a ton in the RV world, RV parks. And so I just wanted to bring her on, ask her, you know, some beginner questions all the way to advanced underwriting, maybe, and just kind of get to know her more. Michelle, I know it's you and your husband doing this together. Um, when did you buy your first one?
Mhm. Oh gosh, actually, we closed on our first park on December 28th of 2023. So we've only been doing this for about what 13 months now.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then you were already in real estate, I believe, right? You had other things before that?
I did. I did actually. Actually started in 5 years ago in October in 2020, I believe it was. So we started back then and actually started buying single family homes. So we started in the long term rental space and then shifted into the short term rental space after about a year.
Cool. What was the catalyst that caused you to shift?
We had built up, so we had bought all these long term rentals and we had had a really good, we had really good returns on them. The interest rates were really low. We were getting the houses at a really good purchase price. We were able to go in and still be able to buy them reasonably, at a great price so that we could make returns on them. But then everything shifted and it was like the entire market went crazy. And that's when everybody was buying because then the rates kept going lower and everybody started buying more houses and it just made it a little more competitive. And for what we were doing with the long term rentals, we really kind of just needed to see more of a cash flow. And that was when we were like, okay, well, let's try. And actually, our first short term rental was not even a short term rental. Our first purchase into the short term rental space was resort zoned land in Scottsdale that we purchased. And that kind of advanced our idea of going into short term rentals because I had, up until that point, never done anything on a short term rental space. I'd never done anything with transient guests who constantly move and the calendar moves on. Um, so we bought this piece of resort zone land at a really, really great price and knew that we were going to be building this resort building on it. But we wanted to run it like a short term rental, but have the resort zoned laws so that we wouldn't fall under the same jurisdiction as everybody else. And so when we did that, I figured we had never done a short term rental before, so we should probably move into that space and at least do some kind of a rental property that we could kind of learn the process on instead of going into a large resort property and doing it all at once.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so
Yeah.
you've been in it went from long-term rentals, short-term rentals, and then what was the thing that brought you like that itched the curiosity more on the RVs?
Well, I we actually, so it took us about 2 years to build this resort because COVID happened and everything was going on, and you couldn't really have more than so many builders or so many techs on a job site at any given time. And so it actually kind of dragged the entire thing out. And then of course we had like the worker shortage and everything else. And so the property took longer than it was supposed to build. And during that entire process, we were kind of evaluating where we wanted to be. When we got to the point where we were opening up the resort, we were actually sitting inside of one of the units and we were putting the finishing touches on the design. And my husband decided at that moment that he was going to leave his W 2 job
Yeah.
and like his career, like that he had built for 30 years. So he had a very stable career that he'd been in forever, was doing amazing at it, had a great income, like completely supported everything that we did. Um, and it was just kind of that moment where he was like, I don't need to do this anymore. I don't want to. And so I was like, okay, well, you've got to make a decision for yourself. Like it was kind of always the goal for him to retire. Um, but you kind of get to a point where you get comfortable with all the income. And so when he finally was like, I've had enough, there were a lot of industry changes in the year before. And it was just really kind of, I think it was just getting to his point where he just could not handle. He didn't want to handle it anymore. Like he just didn't want to have to flow with it anymore. He didn't want to report to a boss anymore. He didn't want to do the 9 to 5 thing anymore. He didn't want to be told when he had to be away from home because he traveled a lot. He kind of wanted to make his own shots. And so that was when he was like, I'm done. Like I'm leaving my job. And he actually turned on a Pace Morby YouTube video and he was like, I want you to watch this real quick. And so he
Mm.
turned that on and he went into the next room and he called his boss on a Zoom call and basically told him what he thought of him. So that
Yeah.
was the end of his YouTube career.
That
um,
was it,
yeah,
huh?
it was
That's
kind of
cool.
a pivotal moment. And so he did that. I was in the other room watching this Pace Morby creative finance thing, and I was like, it was mind blowing to me because I was like, why have we not been doing this the entire? How? Who knew you could buy things without any money? And so
Yeah.
that was something that I was like, could you imagine how much we would have saved all these years if we would have been doing this the entire time? And so
Yeah.
I just had to know. And I'm very much an activator. So if I find something that I like, or if I see something that I want to try, I like jump in. I don't like wait or like ponder on it or consider it or like go through the pros and cons. My big thing is if I don't jump in and try it, one, I'll never learn, but two, I'll never get the guts to do it. So I just have to do it right away. And
Yeah.
so I got on my computer, I signed up for the information call, and then closed the computer, turned off the TV, started walking out to the kitchen. And as I got to the kitchen, he was like, well, what'd you think? And I was like, oh, well, we're going to go to breakfast. And he was like, no, what did you think about the video? And I said, oh, I said, don't worry about that. I said, we have a call with him tomorrow. So we literally, like, he was like, oh, okay. And so he went from leaving his job to now we've got this call set up for the next day to us at lunch, him telling me we need to double our doors or income within the next 60 days. How are we going to do that? And
Mhm.
so at that point, like we've got this resort that just opened. We hadn't seasoned it, so we didn't know how it was going to do. The performa on it said that it was going to do a little over $250,000 a year. But it was brand new. Nobody knew it was there. We hadn't marketed it enough yet. Like nobody had actually been in it. There were no reviews. So it was kind of a scary moment of, okay, so now we've got this resort that we've got to like manage and go and like make money. And now you've left your W-2, but we've got this good long-term and short-term rental portfolio that are doing okay, but we've never lived just on that.
Yeah.
And like, it was kind of a scary moment of what do we do now? So we kind of just we got on the call the next day. We signed up right away for the elite program, which I think they've changed the name of that, but that's the one where you get the one-on-one with the mentor, and jumped right in. I mean, we contacted our mentor within the first couple of days, and it ended up being Justin Tumanowski, who was amazing.
Mhm.
Um, we connected with him, and we kind of were telling him, we were like, this is what we've done. We don't feel like we need to go back into single family homes because now that we've seen the money on the commercial end of it, like it would be hard to go back and do smaller deals at this
Yeah.
point. And so we don't want to piecemeal it together. And if we have to double our doors or double our income, like we're going to have to buy like 20 more single family homes in the next 60 days. And that's going to be impossible. And so, he kind of agreed with us and he was like, yeah, he's like, the only thing I can see you guys doing is a multifamily or maybe a mobile home park or, something like that. And so we really started looking at like mobile home parks, multifamilies, and storage units, and got in Discord when we had Discord and really started going through like the deals that were in those, in all of that information. And we actually reached
Mhm.
out to a broker that was in there. Like there was a deal that was with a broker for, I think it was a storage unit, and reached out to them on the storage unit. And they had sent us a bunch of listings that they had. And at the very bottom of the email was this RV park. And we had never
Mhm.
considered an RV park, but it was like at the bottom, it was like two lines at the bottom. And so we were like, huh. So we really just started researching it. And he was like, my husband he's from Canada, so he's from Montreal and doesn't really know a lot about I mean, he knows big cities. He doesn't know like little towns and stuff. And so he was asking me if I knew anything about this town, Branson, Missouri. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's like a huge tourist town. Like, I remember going there with my daughter when
Yeah.
we were younger for dance competitions. And so I was like, yeah, it's like really popular. And so he was like, do you know anything about RV parks? And I said, I remember that when we would go, that all the families that had RVs would definitely take their the RVs and their boats with them. So he was like, I want you to come take a look at this. And we started really breaking down this RV park. And I was like, it should be doing a lot better. Like, I don't understand why it doesn't have more people in it. And so, especially with where it was positioned, because it was right next to where all the action is. So it's like one of the closest parks. And I was like, why is it not doing more? And so we started really digging into it. And that was kind of when we realized what an asset RV parks are and what they can do, because we'd never looked at them before. And so that was really when we started diving into the numbers and realizing, oh crap, like there's all this money to be made in RV parks and nobody's looking at them. Like everybody kind of pivoted into multifamily and we kind of
Yeah.
went in the other direction, and everybody thought we were nuts. But it really kind of was one of those like, wow, okay, well, let's like look at it. Maybe we are crazy, but let's try it out. And so we really just kind of went down that road. It was all about that. So we went and we visited the park and realized really quickly why it was not doing well. It was an RV park. I mean, it had good bones, but I kind of joke and say that it was more of uh, a used scrapyard by the time we got there.
Mm, yeah.
So it was just really trashed. There was junk everywhere. Everybody had moved in. They were not running it as a transient RV park, which is what it should have been, considering where it was located. Everybody was living there full time, and they were just kind of dumping their trash everywhere. There was a resident drug dealer on site. We believe there was a prostitute next door to him. Like it was a bad space.
Did you buy
So
it cash or creative?
so we ended up buying that one creative. So it was listed for 3 million originally. We went back and did some underwriting on it and said, okay, well, it's not worth the 3 million, and with what we have to do with it, it's not going to work. So we went back to the original seller. Now this is in October, early November. This was early November, and we were like, okay, well, we're considering buying it, but we need something different. Like we want to come down to 1.8 million, and he agreed. He was like, if you guys can buy by the end, close by the end of this year, which is 2 months from now, he was like, I'll agree to the 1.8 million. And so, okay, well, now we've got it down to 1.8 million, and now it's like, where do we find the money? So we're in sub two at this point. We're like looking at all these things. People are talking about seller financing. And so at this point, we go back to the gentleman and we were like, can you seller finance it? And he goes, well, how much? And so Patrick just kind of threw out a number because we were really brand new at this. And we learned some major lessons in this. But he was like, I don't know, 30%. And the guy was like, okay, done. And so we were like, okay, well, we got 30%. We thought we were doing great. Um,
Yeah.
and so now we were like, okay, now we got to get the rest of the financing. So we really started like we went the traditional route, and then we started really trying to connect with private money partners. And what ended up happening was Patrick was on a call in the Sub 2 community. It was on the Daily Dial with Caroline Kane. I remember that. And there was a new gentleman that was from Springfield, Missouri, which is an hour away from where the park is. And so Patrick reached out to him and he's like, I need to talk to you. And the guy was like, I'm brand new. Like, I don't know
Yeah.
anything. And Patrick was like, well, so am I. So we're going to learn this together. Like, we're going to talk. So then he reaches out to him and he tells him, hey, I'm looking for a private money partner. Do you know anybody in the Branson area? And he was like, I might actually know somebody for you. And so he connected us with another gentleman who happened to be in Hawaii on vacation at the time, because now we're closer to Thanksgiving at this point. And Patrick connects with him and they start chatting. Well, the guy's like, yeah, that sounds like it's in my buy box. And so he was like, great, he was like, I'm going back to Branson next week. If you guys are out there, let's meet at the park. So Patrick and I, got together and like booked flights and flew out to Branson and met him and his wife out there, and ended up meeting and hanging out with a gentleman who's built 7 major hotels in the Branson area. And he actually came on as a private money partner. And so what he did was he didn't finance the rest of it for us. He gave us an amount, and then he turned around and actually took us to his bank, which is Branson Bank, and he sponsored us on the rest of the deal
Mm,
so that we could have
nice.
business credit along with it all. So what ended up
Yeah.
happening is that we ended up with the bank closed that deal within 45 days. They gave us preferred terms. They turned around, gave us 80% of the deal, which is practically unheard of in this industry because they're usually 60%. But because of our sponsor, they gave us 80%. Our sponsor gave us around 400,000, and then our seller finance did 30%. And so we actually ended up with all of the money plus a capex, and we were able to walk away with a $70,000 acquisition fee at the closing table.
No, that's pretty cool. It
Yeah.
reminds me of Mundo Sanchez getting paid on the Morphe methods.
Yeah. So it worked out really, really well for us.
Yeah.
And that was our first
So every
introduction to a sub two deal. Later, we found out, just on a side note, what we learned. Later, we found out that the seller, because we're still good friends with all of our sellers, he told us, yeah, I would have financed the whole thing, but we never asked. And so
yeah.
that was a huge lesson.
Yeah, it's funny. I the more time I've been in, I hit the 2 year mark this month being in sub
Oh,
two.
wow. Congratulations.
And the yeah, thank you. It's been crazy seeing over that, 24 months how the deals keep that you see and like here, they get better and better. It's like it goes from 30%, 20, 10 down, 5 down, 0 down, and then it goes like what you're just saying, you're getting paid at closing.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, no, it was definitely an eye-opening experience. We didn't know anything about acquisition fees when we came into this. I mean, like we understood rentals, we understood buying properties, we understood conventional loans. Like we thought we were ahead. Like finding this in community was like a whole game changer. I learned so much this last year. Like there were things that I was like, will that even work? And we just threw it out and it worked.
Yeah, isn't it? It's funny. The best way I can explain sub two is basically it teaches you it's not if, it's just how. Like
Yeah.
how to do something or how to get somewhere.
No,
Yeah,
and
it's
I
it's pretty cool.
absolutely agree with that because it really is. It's like you look at something that looks almost impossible. And
Mhm.
then when you really start breaking it down and you start connecting with people and understanding the deal more, or like the motivation behind the deal, there are so many different ways to do things that it's almost like you cannot not solve a problem. It's
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
impossible not to figure out how to make it happen.
yeah.
And once your mind, I feel like, opens up to the possibility that anything can be solved, it's like you can't go back.
No, no, you
Yeah.
can't.
Because I know for us,
Yeah.
like whenever we see a deal now, we just sit around and we're like, how could we work that out? Like, let's figure it out.
Hmm. It's funny. I had a friend, he had heard of, he was buying a plane. He needed tax benefits. Evidently, planes, you get crazy tax, small planes.
Yeah.
And anyway, he was talking about seller financing it. And I was like, well, what about the Morby method? And he's like, wait, what's that? And then I explained it. He's like, his mind, I don't know. I don't think he actually did that. But when he realized what he could do,
Hmm.
it
No,
blew his mind that he could buy a plane like that.
yeah, I think it's just crazy because it's just there's so many different options and many different ways to do things. I mean, one of our parks, I mean, we've done that park which had like three different people on it, and it still cash flows us extremely well. And the thing is, what's crazy is one of the things I love about RV parks is that it is right now it is currently under construction. Like we've got all brand new water pipes going in, like we're putting in new pads, and the thing still cash flows because even though part of the park is closed down, the other park is still running.
Mm,
Um, and so it's still cash flowing. But we've done that one. We've done one that was 100% seller financing. So she seller financed the park to us, then turned around and seller financed the down payment to us. Then
mm,
our broker actually deferred her payment. So we actually paid half of it the day we closed from the park funds. And then we're paying the second half on the 1 year anniversary of when we bought it. Um, and then the owner actually ended up coming on and hiring on as our manager.
oh, that's perfect, huh? Where's that one?
That one's in Carthage, Missouri. So that one's on Route 66. And then we have another one that we actually have two seller finance notes on because the person that we bought it from bought it over a year ago, and they bit off a little more than they could chew, so they were trying to get out. Um, they turned around and they had seller financed it from the original owner. And so we went back
Man,
to the original owner and renegotiated her note, and then negotiated the
nice.
note with the current owner and got the park under for that.
Yeah, I got it done, huh? That's
Yeah.
cool. Black
Yeah.
belt level.
Right. So
What
we're
would you
just
say?
trying to figure it out.
What would you say is the number one reason you think RV parks are better asset class or your preferred choice or what, however you want to word it? What would you say is the top reason that you're like RV parks, nothing else, this is it, this is me?
I don't think that there is one reason. I think that there is multiple reasons. I think,
Hmm.
it depends on like who you're talking to, right? One of the biggest reasons for like my team and the investors, probably some of the highest returns in the asset classes. Like you can't get returns that are higher than most RV parks. You can change the model of an RV park with the flip of a switch. I can go from affordable housing to affordable vacations, basically just because I've decided one day to change the way that things work. Between
Flexible.
mobile home parks, storage units, or multifamily, if you decide, like, say, I own a storage unit, right? I rent out the storage unit for every month for $60. Somebody comes in, moves in their stuff, right? I charge $60 a night on my pads. So I'm reselling that pad every single night, not just once a month. It just
Yeah, and
constantly
you're
goes. I can change my pads price based on dynamic pricing, which then comes into
mhm.
that whole thing. So based on what's going on, I think during the eclipse, parks had upped their prices by 200%, and they were booking out because it was a once in a lifetime thing that everybody wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
um, you can value add
And-
them in multiple different ways. I can add, something as simple as firewood sales and fire pit rentals, to putting seller financed RVs on them and renting those out. Like I've done that multiple times. We've got RVs that rent out on our properties that make us each an extra $25,000 to $30,000 a year, and we paid nothing going into them. We just pay the loan off for the previous owner, or seller finance them and pay them every month out of the profits.
mhm.
So they net me $30,000.
What would you say the what's the largest expense? Because I know overall it's pretty minimal. What's your main cost other than, mortgage?
Our largest expense will depend on each park. A lot of the time it's electricity, which now it is not uncommon to charge that back to the guest now, especially if they stay for long periods of time. So we have it built in for our parks that if you stay over a certain amount of time, you actually pay for your electricity separately. Where if you're there nightly, that's not part of the equation, but because it's already built into the price. But when you stay there for a long period of time, then we actually charge you for the electricity that you use. So that goes off of our books. Um, so that's probably one of the bigger expenses that we've learned to change over the course of going through this whole business. The other one would probably be staff. And I know that some people don't agree with me on that, but I do believe that RV parks are all about the guest experience. And
Mhm.
you really want to have a staff that cares about your people and the guests that are there and care about your park. Otherwise, you just have somebody who's there to answer the phones and they just don't really care, and you're not going to be profitable as much.
Yeah.
Um, I really think that having the right people in place who really care makes a huge difference for people who are on vacation and people who are going to stay in your park. So I think that, and insurance, definitely insurance.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
those
it
are
makes
probably the
sense.
biggest ones. Yeah.
Okay, so you have two in Missouri, and then where are the others?
I have three in Missouri.
Three in Missouri. Okay. I
Yeah.
used to live in Missouri,
Oh, really?
St.
Yeah. I
Louis.
have
Yeah.
one in Branson, one in Carthage, and then we just got one off of the Lake of the Ozarks that has a full marina and bar and restaurant.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So what
So
would you say like anyone watching, what would you say for 2025, your buy boxes officially, like location, size, kind of thing?
So we've got the three in Missouri. We've got one large one in Virginia. We are currently buying the largest park in Alaska. So our buy box is over 75 pads. I mean, we would look at anything 50 plus. But right now, it seems like we're focused more on 75 and over, but definitely 50 plus. We like to buy at over a 10 cap, so that we know that we can value add and add things to it and make it more profitable. We want parks with a little bit more land so that we can expand onto. We want them to have value add opportunities. And that includes things like, can we add a fire pit, a store? Can we add on, logo gear? Can we add on a restaurant? Is it possible to add on a pool? Um, Ice machines, propane tanks, just different things like that. Like one of our parks, we have golf carts and they make us $100,000 extra a year.
Mm,
So, and those are 20 golf carts, but they're booked 100% of the time. And so we're actually bringing in 20 more because we have a wait list for them every year. Um, but, entertainment, bringing in food options, bringing in food trucks, like things like that we're doing, adding in seasonal sites. So anything that we can value add on to, anything that we could potentially expand the park and maybe add some glamping areas or even more pads, tiny homes, more RVs. Um, Definitely starting at least at $250,000 NOI. We like to start there because one of the first things that we're going to do is add web pages, add back end systems, and add management. And we want to have the cash flow to be able to service the loan and do all those things and get those things in place. And then we recently opened up a fund, and we take the fund and we actually inject funds into the park to get the rest of it up to speed so that it can do a fast return. And so I think that we pretty much start there. But, not to say that we don't look at other options. Like I've looked at other parks, some of them where they're a little bit smaller or they don't do as much of an NOI or they're too large and we're just not ready to take them down. And we've actually taken those and given them off to other people to buy and help them
yeah,
negotiate those out. So
makes sense. So the ones that you are buying yourself, are you doing, are you primarily keeping those, like passing them on to legacy, or are you like value adding, stabilizing and selling at a multiple? Or I'm curious what the exit is, if there is exit.
So right now, what the exit plan is that we are buying them, we are repositioning them, rebranding them, getting them up to speed, and then doubling their value. So we are buying and holding them. And then in about 5 years, we're going to go back and reevaluate. And what we want to do is we want to see which ones actually hit our certain marks and which ones fall short. So the ones who fall short will probably pass on to another investor or another person who's ready to take on that park, and then keep the ones that we currently have that are producing well, and we'll roll them into the next fund for our investors.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question. Pretend, or there's a good chance someone watches this and they're like, I want to find Michelle an RV park and sell it to her. Like they want to do that. And then and then it does it when it records, it's clear. For whatever reason it shows up like this, but it'll look good. Um,
Okay.
but pretend pretend that someone
Okay.
really wants to sell a deal to you. What have you found to be the best source for people to look for RV parks? Like, is it direct? Is it a form of direct to seller? Is it Crexy, or what would you say? Are you back?
I think so. Can you repeat that? I think you
Okay.
said, because I got little bits and pieces, but I think you said, what would be the best way for somebody to get started in this?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll clip it out. Um, but
Okay.
pretend someone's watching it and
Um,
they're like, they want to wholesale a deal to you. How do they find those deals?
in order to wholesale a deal to me, I think the best way to do it would be to cold call and like maybe contact. a park directly. What I have found personally is that if you look at, say, an area of town or an area that you want to buy a park in, if you actually start looking at the park reviews and start looking at them over the years, you'll notice certain things. Like if you go out and say, find a park or they're out of capital and they can't improve things. And so by
Mm.
calling them up and just saying, hey, I noticed you've got this great area. I, love being in this, whatever. We love visiting this park or whatever. Are you interested potentially in an offer? What would that look like to you? You would be amazed how many people just they're ready, especially when you look at things like reviews and notice that they're really not up to date. They don't have back end reservation systems. They're not online. It's usually because they don't have the money and they haven't projected themselves into the new year, which means that or the new decade, which means that they're losing a lot of valuable business and they probably see that themselves. They just don't have the capacity, the time, or the want to move into a new generation.
Yeah,
And
it reminds me
so,
too of like Cody Sanchez.
yes. And so that
Mhm.
really does make, I think that that is probably one of the biggest telltale signs that I see going into things. So, like when somebody brings us a park, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start looking at what do they have in place already? How does their website look? What does their booking system look like? Are they
Yeah,
on third party booking sites? Are they more transient or are they a long term campground? What is their location? What do their reviews look like? And do they own their Google business profile? So those are all the things that I'm first going to look at. And then I'm going to, that starts the psychological analysis of what's going on with the park. So they're probably
mm,
tired. They don't have the capital. So we could probably go in pretty easily and just say, okay, like, could we structure a deal to see if you're potentially interested in selling to us?
yeah.
So like that would be one of the first things for somebody who I say just gets into this. Like that would be my
Okay.
biggest thing.
And mm, yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Well, awesome. What is the best way pretend someone has a deal and they're like, oh, I gotta show Michelle. I have to show her this deal. It's great, whether it is or not. But what's the best way they can send you or reach out to you? Perfect. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining today. Um, and I'm going to be seeing you in a couple weeks. All right.